This is the Bob and Tom Show. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks very much for joining us. We're going to hook up with comedian Mike Birbiglia. Is this Mike on the phone?
I'm here, guys. How are you?
Burbags, good morning.
I know that today we kind of wanted to shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
Because you were really good friends with comedian Mitch Hedberg. Mitch was just our guest in the studio. I think we saw him in November, I believe. And
yeah.
Mitch died last week. He had some heart problems. He'd also had some drug issues. But I know you want to talk a little bit about Mitch this morning.
Yeah, I wrote an entry about him today. This week's Secret Public Journal is dedicated to my friend and comedic hero, Mitch Hedberg, who died last week. I feel a little lost eulogizing someone I looked up to so much, but Mitch treated all comics the same. It didn't matter if it was Dave Attell or someone who'd been doing comedy 3 days. If you didn't know Mitch, he was a comedian who had long hair over his eyes and wore sunglasses and looked down at the floor and delivered brilliant lines like, "I think foosball is a cross between soccer and shish kebab." "I used to do drugs. I still do, but I used to too." To call him a one-liner comic would be a disservice to the strong connection he made with his audience. To Mitch, his jokes were like his children. Some of them were accomplished, some of them weren't, some of them didn't even make a lot of sense, but he loved them all equally. He just loved jokes. When people didn't laugh, he'd pause a second and he'd go, "All right, that joke was ridiculous." I think some people misunderstood Mitch. They'd go, "What is he doing? He's lying on the floor, or he's walking behind the curtain?" Well, that was all part of it. He rode the line of what people considered a show, so no two shows were the same. He was the Iggy Pop of comedy. He was a rock star. He sold out 2,000-seat theaters without having a sitcom. So he was this beacon of hope for real comics that you didn't have to move to Hollywood to become a comedy star. When I started doing the road 5 years ago, I found out that I'd be opening for Mitch in Dayton, Ohio, and I couldn't believe it. I was struggling to get by as a road comic, so I had that date circled in my calendar for months. So I show up at the club, and they asked me if I'll pick up Mitch in my car and bring him to the club, and I was in shock. First, because Mitch Hedberg was going to ride my car, and second, that Mitch Hedberg rides in cars at all. I always kind of envisioned him riding in a spaceship or just kind of teleporting onto stage. So I was really taken aback when I picked him up, and he and his wife Lynn treated me like an old friend. So we do the show, and later in the week, I asked them if they want to go bowling because I had my bowling shoes there, and so we go bowling. And I'm very rattled. I'm so rattled that I'm bowling with Mitch Hedberg that I'm awful. I'm rolling all kinds of ones and threes, and I'm so embarrassed. And at the end, Mitch says to me, "When you said that you wanted to go bowling, I thought that you would be good at bowling." And then we're waiting in line to pay, and there are these teenage girls next to us in line, and so to embarrass me, he goes, "Do you think he's cute?" And they go, "He's all right." And then his wife Lynn comes over and talks to Mitch privately, and then Mitch comes back and goes, "Lynn says I should apologize for embarrassing you." And then there was a pause, and I go, "Mitch, you didn't actually apologize. You just said you were supposed to." And he was like, "Ha, good one." That night, Mitch was on stage, and in the middle of the set, he goes, "Oh, no, I got to go to the bathroom. Can someone come on stage and tell a joke?" And there was this long, gaping silence, and then he's like, "I'm serious, you guys. I really got to go." And it's still silent. I mean, no one's ever seen anything like this in a show. And so I'm backstage with Lynn, and I'm like, "Are you going to go up?" And she was like, "Will you go?" And I was like, "All right." So I walk on the stage, and he doesn't know I'm there because his eyes are closed. And I go, "Mitch, I'm here." And he goes, "Oh, thanks, man." And he walks off like this is just like an everyday thing. And then the audience is looking at me, and I'm looking at the audience, and we're all just laughing at the sheer absurdity of the situation. So I just look down at the floor, and I go, "I'm pretty good at tennis, but I will never be as good as the wall. The wall is relentless." There's a jar of jelly beans at the state fair that says, "Guess how many and you win the jar." I was like, "Come on, man, let me just have some." So then Mitch comes back and he's laughing and he goes, "Oh man, you did my best jokes." I was never quite sure if Mitch and I were friends because he never said a lot. He rarely talked about himself at all, but I just felt lucky to be around him. whenever he spoke, I just listened real hard. And when I was opening for him on the Comedy Central Live tour, he offered to come to New York City for the release of my CD at the comic strip. I kept giving him an out so that he didn't feel obliged to do it, but he insisted on it. So he flew himself to New York, and he performed on 2 shows for nothing. I offered to pay him, and he kept refusing. He just gave me a hug and walked out the door, and that was it. The late booker for the comic strip, named Lucian Hold, commented that what amazed him most about Mitch was that he had his eyes closed on stage, yet he had the most profound connection with the audience. He didn't see the audience, he felt the audience. There are all kinds of great stories about Mitch, about how some fans had driven 6 hours to see him, and so he got them a hotel room, and how George Carlin was once in the audience for one of his shows and said, "That blind guy is amazing." How he once paid for a sold-out audience in Pittsburgh to all have shots of tequila. This week I have emailed with so many people who are crushed by Mitch's death. I've spoken to people who never met Mitch personally and can't help but start crying in the middle of their day. I feel the same way. It's overwhelming. It's so sad to lose someone who made so many people happy. On New Year's Eve, I was on an elevator in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and this guy goes, "I know you. You're that guy on Comedy Central who does that joke about dizzy chickens." And I go, "No, that's Mitch Hedberg." And he was like, "Oh, yeah. You're good, too. But that guy's the best." And I was like, "Yeah, he is." And that concludes my Secret Public Journal.
Well, that's a nice tribute.
Mike Birbiglia, that was really well done, Mike. Thanks very much.